Oh, yes. This whole zero tolerance policy, yes. And they do pursue all allegations of fraudulent acts involving any individual or entity covered by the regulations, rules, administrative issuances, yes. Appropriate administrative disciplinary measures or contractual remedies will be applied if wrongdoing is established. Oh, this what they have there in the United Nations. Yes, I'd like to know what sanctions are available to the United States, and then I'd like to know each and every entity of the United Nations. Yes, and individuals that are covered by, as in their regulations of the United Nations. Yes, their rules, yeah, their administrative issuances, their appropriate administrative disciplinary measures, yes, or contractual remedies. Oh, now they have these proceeding. No, no, wait. It's regulation, rules, administrative issuances, policies, procedures, and agreements described in this framework and every framework of the United Nations. Now, let's say that you don't understand what I'm. Well, not only are you getting sanctioned, Pooch, for every regulation that you violated, Pooch, of the United Nations, yes, for every rule that you violated, for every administrative issuance that you violated, for every policy that you violated, and every procedure that you violated, and every agreement that you violated. See, I'm going to go through all of them, Pooch. Now, what I'd like to know, yes, is exactly how much has the United States contributed to the United Nations since they were the League of Nations? Yes. And I remember there's quite a building in New York City where Senior Rockefeller that passed away 4 or 5 years ago, there wouldn't be any brains out there that I need to know about because I know about the dogs. Did David Rockefeller Sr. have a dog that's still alive? Seems like they live longer than human beings. He could always. Well, why don't we go through the actual employees and then all of the entities and then all the contractual agreements and provisions? Because I'd like to know everybody that has a contract with the United Nations. I'd like to know how much the United States has paid to support the United Nations. I'd like to own that building for myself. See, my thought was to remodel it, use it as office space in New York City. It's right across the street from the Ford building. Yes. And then, since it's the United Nations, I would remove anything and everything that doesn't have anything to do with humanity. They say that they're concerned about humanity, but I think they employ a lot of people that aren't. And this whole zero tolerance policy where they have these rules and procedures and regulations and issuances, and I'm going to go through every one of them. Pooch, the United States not just going to get sanctioned, and they're going to get sued for every fucking violation. Now, you're absolutely sure I have to go to court on Friday? Because I have documented official misconduct, abuse of official authority. Yes, and I told you that I didn't want to sleep on a hardwood floor. So, get me all the physical property of the United Nations and all their contractual third-party agreements. Yes, get me every contract of every individual that's ever done any business with the United Nations for the last 40 years. I like to GPS their locations. I like to get their internet. I'd like to make absolutely sure that I know of all the contractual obligations of every third party that does business with the United Nations. Now, my thought was, what if I got that building and I fixed it up, rented out some offices to those that work in New York City, might even have it for an office for myself, or for an office for myself. Some of these different things that I'd like to do. I mean, there are quite a few projects that I like to do in New York City. Ouch! Now, The thought was that we could have United Nations meetings in 10 different nations, and each nation would host the meetings, and we'd take the United Nations and we'd make it international. Pooh. What if you were in Brazil? You look so good. And we decide in 2020 we're going to have our international United Nations meeting in the nation of Brazil. Well, I'm thinking of kind of cutting up the United Nations. Now, the thought is, okay, I could use that office space for what I want to do. So, well, we don't have a zero tolerance policy in the United States of fraud, of corruption, of misconduct, of fraud.